In this video, we're going to be creating a dagger similar to this one. We're not going to actually be making this dagger precisely, just kind of use this as kind of a frame of reference for where we're going to go with this dagger. So what we're going to end up doing is making a high poly version of the dagger and a low poly version of the dagger. We're going to transfer the detail from the high poly to the low poly through a normal map bake. And then we're going to create the other textures, being the albedo or the diffuse, and then the metal map, and then the gloss map, and put those all together and have something that looks kind of like this. Ours might look a little bit more tarnished after this, just so it's a little bit more visually interesting. But let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to get a box that's roughly the dimensions of the dagger that I want. So again, your default box is going to come in at 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. And let's have this be, I don't know, 16 inches tall, maybe 4 inches wide, and 2 inches deep. So again, it's going to convert it all to millimeters. So I'm just going to hit the escape key, and now I have a box that's roughly the size of the dagger. I'm going to probably end up making it a little bit longer. We'll see what happens. But I'll just call this size box. Hit N for new mesh, or hit add item mesh, and then we can get started modeling. So what I'm going to do is just change one setting real quick. Right now I have it to where my inactive and my active mesh are displaying the same. So I'm just going to hit the O key, go to inactive mesh. Right here it says checkbox, make inactive same as active. I'm just going to turn that off. Now we just have a little box right here that's going to be roughly the size what we want for our dagger. And it's usually good to build a model to scale, especially when you're doing something like normal maps or other types of bakes like light bakes or AO bakes. Because again, if this thing was 40 miles tall, a bunch of things are going to change scale-wise, so it's usually best to just work in the scale that you're going to be at. So what I'm actually going to do to start this dagger off is I'm just going to do a quick copy paste. So copy, different mesh, paste, and this right here is going to be the beginnings of my blade. So what I'll probably do is I'll just speed this video up for this rough modeling portion, just so you don't have to kind of see it in slow motion pretty much. Okay, now we have kind of base geometry to work with. Again, I'm probably going to tweak these proportions a little bit. Other thing I just want to make sure that I want to make sure that everything in this scene is 100% centered. So when I grab this and move it up, I don't just arbitrarily click somewhere and just move it up, because again, that could move it left or right. You're seeing it kind of sway on the x-axis. I want to make sure that I grab that green handle and pull it straight up. And at this point, that should be kind of self-explanatory. You guys should be building at world center, but I just wanted to point that out just in case. So let's go ahead, make this dagger handle a little bit wider, a little bit shorter. Now let's go ahead and start making the blade a little bit better. So right now there's actually no blade to it, it's just kind of flat because it's a box. So realistically this is still 100% just a box. There's 4 sides around, one on the top, one on the bottom. So if I was to do a loop slice through here, set the count to 1, I can go ahead and scale this out. And now my dagger has a little bit more of a point to it. And again, I can make that as pointy or not as I really want to. So the next thing that I want to do, let's go ahead and make a couple slices in between. And this is just to give the overall blade shape just a little bit more interest instead of it being just a perfectly straight line. So again, we're going to take this, pull it out a little bit. Oops, undo that. Pull this one out. Pull this one out just a little bit. So now you can see there's a little bit of shape going on here. So now what I'm going to do is give this guy a point. So I'll just extrude this, pull it down, scale this down to a point. And again, I'm not going to do a join average on this and make it to be a super precise point. Excuse me. Because again, most daggers aren't going to be kind of infinitely sharp at the end. There's going to be a little bit of dullness there. So again, just tweaking this a little bit to get it to where we want it. There we go. And again, you can see the smoothing changing on that. It's not going to be really that big of a deal. So when we zoom out, now it looks like a point, but it's not extremely pointy. So the other thing that I'm going to do real quick, this will help with the point, but it'll help with another thing down the road. So I'm going to do a loop slice down the front right here. So now it kind of has a left and a right symmetry. And again, if I want to try to zoom in on this point, if I just try to zoom in like this, I might have some problems doing that. So let's just grab these vertices, Shift A, and they'll come right in there. Let's grab these, pull them down, and just looking at this blade all the way through. So now what I'm going to do is right now, if I was to look at this in silhouette mode, I can kind of almost tell there's a vertex here, vertex here, vertex here. So I just want to smooth this out a little bit. So I'm just going to double click this, beat a bevel, grab my blue handle, and again, I probably don't need this many cuts. Set it to 2. There we go. And you can see now, just like when we've used the bevel tool before, it just kind of evens this out a little bit. And again, another thing, if you hit the S key, it's going to activate the slide tool. I can slide this up and down without it changing the shape very much. So bevel this one somewhere in there. And again, now you can see that we have kind of evenly spaced polygons through here. And from the side, you can see that this gets kind of thick all the way down to thin. And again, before I do any of these crazy bevels or anything like that, what I want to do is I want to make sure, let's just undo those handful of bevels that I just did. Oops, so it missed a step. That's okay. Only thing we did was add this slice. And again, making sure that's at 50%. Again, we have everything centered, so I know that this side of the blade is the exact same as this side of the blade still. So realistically, I can look at this from the front. I just want to make sure that my overall curve is where I want it. Same thing here, thicker up here, down to super thin. I could even come in here and just make sure that this is the right thickness. I might want it to be a little bit more thin, a little bit more thick. Kind of whatever I want. So we can hit that S key to slide this guy. So let's just bevel all 3 of these at the same time. Again, beat a bevel. Grab that blue handle, slide it down. I'm actually not liking the spacing between there, so let's adjust that a little bit. Oops. I'm gonna hit the S key to slide this one down. Beat a bevel. So again, we can kind of place these wherever we want them. Now what we're going to do is just save our scene really quickly. We'll just call it dagger.lxo and hit save. And again, that's just in case the software crashes. And let's actually go ahead and change our mesh name to Dagger just so we know what we're working in. So now what we're going to do is just change the shape of the blade a little bit. If I was to look at it from the top, it's a little bit boring. So what we're going to do is grab this little edge that's going all the way through, scale it up a little bit. Let's look at this from a different angle. Let's actually grab this one that's going all the way down, and this one, and we want these on both sides. There we go. I'm just going to scale those in just a tiny bit. So again, we get a little bit better curvature. So now what I'm going to do is just add to the curvature a little bit more. So let's actually turn symmetry on. We'll grab this edge, which goes all the way down, hold shift, double click, grab this edge. I'm going to hit the S key. That's going to activate that slide tool. So now what I'm going to do is just click and drag to the right, and that's just going to bring that edge a little bit over. Let's go ahead and look at the bottom and see what it's doing. So again, you can see it's just bringing it in, but it's doing it uniformly. So again, we're keeping that same distance there. So now what we're going to do is we can just leave symmetry on, have these top edges selected, loop slice. So now what we're going to do with this loop slice is realistically, I just want to get this dagger a little bit more round. So what I can do is switch to the scale tool, let's turn symmetry off. I actually want to focus on the tip of this dagger, so Shift A, go back to edges, it remembers what edges I had selected, and activate that scale tool. And go to the top, and I can look at this and just see, and realistically I just want to keep this as round as possible. So let's go to the bottom. Excuse me. That's looking okay. And again, another thing that you could do is if this bottom area, if this starts to get a little bit too thick, I could either go in and kind of babysit this and make sure that it's good all the way up. But the other thing that I could do is all these bevels that I put in here, so these extra edges, I could technically go in and let's go to the front view, and I could just grab every handful and remove these and then rebevel to get the roundness here. But what we have going on right here is pretty good. Let's just look at it from a side profile. So again, you can kind of babysit that or doctor it up any way you want, but we're going to call it good from here. So the next thing I want to do is let's just open this image back up, is I want to have some type of an inset right here. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So to do this, what we're going to do is realistically, we don't need the top portion of this dagger anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually extrude this up, and this will be the portion that is kind of inside this little cross guard. But these polygons right here we don't need, so I'm just going to delete those. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these polygons right here, and that should be good. So actually what I want to do is I want to have these selected on both sides. So let's turn on symmetry, hold the Alt key, have symmetry in the Z activated. So now if I grab these two, these guys on the other side will be selected. So these will probably be fine. So I'm just going to do an extrude and pull those in. So from here, what I'm going to do is let's actually select these again. I'm just going to look at this from the front. Again, symmetry and the X is on. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit in the Y, and then in a little bit on the X. And that's just so from the side I can see how this is working. And then here, what I'm going to do is just test this out, see what happens. I'm going to grab these edges, B to bevel this out, and I get this little scenario right here. So again, at this point, this little guy is now an n-gon. So just to make sure that things are triangulating right, I'm just going to hold shift and hit T and just see how this is triangulating out. And I might change up some of these edges. So I'll probably do this scenario. So again, flipping these, if I just select the edge and hit the V key, V is in Victor, it'll get rid of those. Or I guess it won't get rid of them, it'll just flip them. Let's flip that one as well. So again, realistically, we just want to have more evenly spaced polygons. Let's actually grab this guy, pull him down just a little bit, because now you can see how this is getting rounded out. And again, if I want, what I can do is just come in and just scale this a little bit more. Something like that. But we don't have to. I'll leave that one up to you. And the other thing, let's just undo all of this real quick, just so you can kind of see some different ways of playing with this. So we need to get rid of our bevel. There we go. Before I bevel, what I could do is actually grab this edge and pull it down a little bit. Now I can go ahead and beta bevel these, pull these out, and now this is already down. I don't need to pull it down. But again, just a different way of doing that same thing. So to triangulate these the fast way, I'm grabbing the polygon, holding shift, hitting T, and it triangulates it. Or if you hate hotkeys, geometry, polygon, oops, I'll eventually get it. Triple is right here, hotkey shift T. So let's hit that V key again for those. And again, symmetry's on in the X. So we're going to call this good for the blade. Again, I don't want to go into crazy detail with this because we want to keep this fairly simple, just so the video is a little bit quicker. So let's actually turn symmetry off. So to give this a little bit of visual interest, I'm just going to, let's turn symmetry on in the X. Grab these two edges, do that loop slice. I'm just going to take this, scale it in, scale it down, and that's just to give this a little bit of visual interest. Now what we're going to do, excuse me, is to save a step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to Dagger underscore high, and for new mesh, Dagger underscore low. And what I'm going to do is just take this, copy, paste it right in here, and we'll just turn this off. And you'll see why we need this later. So let's continue with this. I just want to grab pretty much every edge except for these ones going up and down. And that should be all of them. There we go. And if I need to have this easier to see, I can isolate this selection. So I'm just going to hit beta bevel, make sure we're grabbing our blue handle. Right now our roundness level is set to 2. Let's just bump that up to 3 for this one. So now if I turn the wireframe off and zoom out, this looks a little bit better. Let's actually undo on this. What I'm going to do is I just deleted the low real quick. I'm going to grab this guy and create a bevel here. I'll just have a roundness level of 2. And then just grab this and scale it up just a tiny bit. So now you can see that our curves overall are looking a little bit better. So copy, paste, have that guy turned off. And now let's grab these again. Just double clicking on those. Shift middle click, we'll grab all those edges. Now let's bevel this and do that same thing. And roundness level 3 on that one. So now when we turn our wireframe off, this is looking a little bit better. Again, you can still see there's kind of a pressure point right here. So we could maybe scale this up a little bit, but it's looking just fine. And again, the other thing that we could do if we wanted to is that S key for that slide tool that we've been using. We can kind of redistribute these so they're a little bit more even. Not really necessary though. We'll just leave it at that. So let's unhide that. Now let's focus on this portion. So the handle, what we're going to do is let's actually do that same thing. Copy, paste this into our low. what I want to do is I want to give this a little bit more visual interest. So what I'm going to do is let's add a handful of loops in here. This should probably be fine. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do 6. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to make this kind of look like it's kind of a wrapped handle or something like that. And again, it's not going to have the slight diagonal to it and actually wrap all the way up and around. We don't want to take forever on this. We just want to make it a little bit more visually interesting. So what I'm going to do is grab each of these. Again, really utilizing that bevel tool. And I'm actually using the red handle this time. It doesn't, in this case, doesn't really matter. I just wanted an extra edge on each side, so if I had a roundness level of 1 and grab the blue handle, it would do the same thing is what I was doing with the red handle. But realistically, all that I want to have happen is I want to have 3 edges that are evenly spaced, where these other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total edges were. So what I'm going to do is grab the middle edge of this. So shift, double click, shift, double click, and that grabs the middle edge of all these. Now I'm going to switch to the scale tool. And what I can do with this is, one, I'm going to turn symmetry off, but I can either just scale it on this z-axis and this x-axis like this, or I could switch to action center local, and then I could just scale in on this little middle cyan one. Either way works. I'm just going to scale this in a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is let's select all of these. I'm holding shift now, double click. So now I have every one of these edges selected. B to bevel. And this is just going to be a really tiny bevel. So something like this, roundness level, bump that up. Something like that. So now when I zoom out, what we have is something that's a little bit more visually interesting. And this you can kind of play around with what it looks like. So just going back to the original. Oh, it'll be there eventually. There we go. Let's say that I didn't want that as spaced out, or maybe I wanted it more spaced out. Then I would just go back to this original state. Let's actually save our file real quick. And when we do our bevel tool, we'll just have it, again, set that to 1. Again, we just have one extra edge being added on the top and the bottom. Just make that a little bit smaller. Just the gap between these. And then we'll do that same thing. Oops, I actually had one extra one in there. There we go. So roundness level to 1. We have 1, 2, 3 edges. Again, making sure we don't accidentally pop that up to 5. So if I grab this one and I grab this one, Modo understands patterns, so I can just hit the up arrow and it'll grab the other middle ones. Hold shift, double click, scale tool. And instead of turning local on, we'll just scale it. We'll actually scale this one at a time. So let's scale it on the X and then scale it on the Y. And again, the reason I'm doing this is because it's kind of oval shaped. So if I was to scale it on both X's, it's going to go in on the X-axis more or faster than it's going in on the Z-axis. So from here, we'll just grab all 3 of these, hold shift, double click, B to bevel, zoom in where our bevel tool actually is. And again, we don't want to over bevel like that where the edges start to collapse into each other. Something like that should be fine. So again, same thing with the handle. We could definitely had made that a little bit more interesting of a shape, have a little bit of curve to it, whatever. But we're just keeping this really, really simple. So now what we're going to do is grab this little guy, bring him down. I'm actually not keen on how round he is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab him, copy paste him. Actually, let's not do that. Let's just delete him out altogether. Let's grab a new cylinder. Let's just have its sides set to 32. Hit enter. We'll scale this down and throw it into place. So something like that. And with this, if I wanted to, I could turn symmetry on maybe and have it be a little bit kind of wider at the top. So it would be this shaped. I can kind of do whatever I want, but again, we're just keeping this simple for the demo. So what I'm going to do is just really quickly copy paste this into our low so we can use that later. So what I'm going to do is grab these edges, beat a bevel around this level, pop that up to 2. Let's turn our symmetry on, hold the Alt key, symmetry on in the Z. So grab the front and the back, extrude, scale that in, extrude, oops, turn symmetry off, scale that in on the X, go to the front view. Let's scale this down so it's something like this. And now let's just do a real quick bevel on these. And again, this is something that we could have made this a little bit more round, have this dent in, whatever. Let's actually have that dent in just a little bit. So we're just going to, oops, let's turn symmetry on. Actually, that was my bad. So undoing a few times, sorry about that. Need to have symmetry on when I bevel these. And again, it is sitting right in the world center, so it wouldn't be that hard to resymmetrize that. So extrude, just do a joint average on those. Pull that little shape in. Just do 1. Pull this guy in. Beat a bevel. Now, if I was to look at this, and if I caught it at the right light, let's actually go ahead and turn this on reflection. Turn the wireframe off. You can see how that kind of dents in a little bit. That looks a little bit more visually interesting. So change that back to default. So realistically, we'll call this good for the high poly. So realistically, what we're going to look for is these little softer round edges to be baked into the normal. Same thing with these guys here. Same thing with all this cool stuff going on here, and then this area in here. So let's go ahead and make the low poly, and then we'll transfer it over. But the one thing I'm going to do before that, so let's give this a material. We'll just call it HP for high poly. And the other thing that I want to do is I'm going to say crease by smoothing angle, and then I'm going to say that I want this little loop right here. So select, again, I have symmetry on the Z on, so I'm going to select 2 polygons that are kind of in order, 1, 2, L to loop. That's going to loop this all the way around. Game tools, harden. Now I have that on there. Don't need any for the top. Those are soft transitions, so that realistically should be good. The other thing I could do if I wanted to would be potentially go in, select this all the way around. Let's actually grab this one. I won't grab the whole thing just so you don't need to see this. Is instead of using hard edges on this, I could do another bevel on this, so it's something like that. Let's actually do that just for fun. So I got rid of my hard edges, so I'm going to say I want, double clicking those, going, actually I need all of these, so I can just bevel these at the same time. I want to make sure that I don't accidentally grab any of those that are kind of connecting the two. And again, you can see that it's grabbing the ones in the back. So now B to bevel, zoom in on this, and just give it a really little bevel, and you can see where the smoothing went from that, because it was at that 180-degree smoothing. Now I have a lot of polygons in there that it can smooth between. And the other thing I just want to look, so yep, anywhere where there was a potential, let's undo that real quick, a potential like 5-pointed star, when that gets beveled, it's going to do something like this. So to clean this up, what I'm going to do is just grab these and just do a join average. Again, I could have gotten rid of that little V right there before I did it, but it's fine to clean this up afterwards. And realistically, even if I was to bake this into the normal, it wouldn't be super noticeable. But regardless, turn our wireframe off. Just adjust things slightly, so this will be good for our high poly. So let's go ahead and save the scene. And our dagger high is done. So polygon count wise or triangle count wise, you can see this is sitting at almost 7,000. So now we have our low. And kind of what we're going to do with this, you could probably take a guess, is we're going to start using this geometry that we originally had, turn our wireframe on, to make the low poly. So again, this one, 16 sides around, realistically that should be fine. We don't need this top and this bottom one. Actually, I want to check one thing on the high real quick. Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to do is let's grab all this stuff. Let's actually just grab the blade. I'm just going to actually turn snapping off. I'm just going to grab the blade and bring this up. So instead of this being visible, it would be inside of the sword. So you can see that kind of dent in a little bit. We'll call that good. Yep. The other thing is I want to make sure that it's not kind of popping out of the top. So something like that. There we go. That should work. So we have our dagger low handle. Let's actually have just the handle visible. Turn this on. So again, we did a little bit of beveling. I just want to make sure, that these two are pretty much sitting right on top of each other, just like in the normal bake exercise that we did. Both high and low, sitting right on top of each other. So the handle at this point is just set. Let's check this little guy. So he's got a lot of edges going on. So what I'm going to do is, if I remember correctly, oops, I want to go, just double click. So 64, but that's both sides. So he's got 32 edges going around. So I'm going to grab every other edge. So grab that one and that one, hold the up arrow. It's going to go all the way around. I'm just going to hit the backspace key. We'll just keep this guy at 16 edges around. So again, a little bit lower poly. And we won't even indent it or anything. Let's just leave it as is, just like this. So this guy, again, we did bevel this. How many polygons is this? This is sitting at 100. So yeah, we'll leave this as is. We just want to turn that high on and make sure that these are sitting right by each other. So again, really close. Let's actually grab this little edge, and I'm pretty sure that we did. Turn symmetry off. We did scale this out a little bit. So let's just make those match. So again, at this point, since we grabbed the one from the other, we don't actually have to remodel this by any means. The size box, we really don't need that anymore. Again, like I said, I went a little bit bigger than I thought I was going to. So now I really don't have anything in the low for the blades. What I'm going to do is let's see if we can't just salvage this. So copy, paste, and the same thing with the low is during a portion of this, I could have copy pasted it to work with it. So since we don't have that, what we do have is, okay, we have some stuff that's screwed up here. So what I'm going to do is grab this center edge. Let's actually isolate this selection. I'm going to grab this center edge. So let's do this. I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to make sure that, okay, this is the inset. So what I'm going to do is grab this half, and delete it. And then I'm going to grab this top half. Be really careful with our selection here. And delete it. So now we have kind of a quarter of this to work with, so we can mirror it back and then take the back and the front and mirror it over. So this should hopefully save us some time. So what I'm going to do without using any weird new tools is I'm effectively just going to kind of unbevel this scenario. So what I'm going to do is grab this whole cluster of vertices and do a join average. And again, join average is in this model tab, vertex, join average. Oops, can't activate it when there's not multiple things selected. So let's go ahead and join these together. Let's do this guy, this guy, this guy, and it's again a little bit tedious of a process. And now what I'm going to do is turn on this Dagger high, and I'm just going to use this as a reference for where things were. So again, I just want to line these up to where they're about the same thickness that they were, and you can see when the one mesh starts to kind of go through the other mesh, you know that you've kind of gone the right distance. Because realistically, I just want these to be kind of hovering over top of each other. And this portion, since it indents here and the high poly's or the low poly's not actually going to indent, I'm just going to kind of bring the handful of ones here back to where they were when it had its original thickness. So again, this is going to take a little bit of time, but really there's not that many vertices here, so it won't take that long. And again, this is just one of those scenarios that in hindsight, I probably should have just saved out a version of this Dagger before I beveled it. That would have been the smartest thing to do, but that's just another example of learning from your mistakes. So just Shift A, and then bring that right up there. Shift A, bring that right up there. We're pretty much bringing it up to all those little high points. And again, you can see that I'm moving it in just the Z and the X axis by grabbing this little handle. And again, I can adjust it. So from here, what I'm going to do is just make sure that my thickness for this is okay. So let's turn this off and let's do the mirroring process for this. So again, activate that mirror tool. It's going to be in your duplicate tab. I'm going to mirror down the X, hit apply, do the mirror tool again in the Z, all these set to defaults, hit apply. So now we should realistically have our blade established again. And from here, what I can do is I can look at it, see if there's any weird spots where there's like lines that aren't almost straight, like this one right here. You can see how this little line went in. So let's actually turn symmetry in the Z on. So when I grab one, I get the other one. Turn symmetry off now. I can just kind of scale those a little bit. Just get them right in place. There we go, that should be fine. So from here, let's unhide this. Now I effectively have my low poly version of the Dagger. So again, this one is 650. This one is 6,700. So again, the low poly is a lot lighter. Pretty much the high poly is 10 times as many tries as the low poly one is. So the only other thing I'm going to do, and this is just to keep things clean, is there's a big huge N-gon right here. I should probably have symmetry in that Z turned on. So I can either manually kind of cut this back and forth, and again, when it does it on one side, I'll do it on the other, or potentially geometry polygon. We had that triple that triangulates. There's quadruple. Click, and this will turn it into all quads, but sometimes it doesn't do a good job. I would rather have it up and down like this. So just grab this and hit the V key. See if it does it. Nope, it's not going to do it. So we'll just manually do it. It's not a big deal. There's only 3 connection points. 1, make sure I get it the right vert. 2 and 3. And with symmetry, it does it on both sides. So there we go. So let's just make sure no polys here or here. That's good. No polygons here. Our dagger's one big whole piece. And realistically, with the shape of this, we could probably, let's turn the dagger high on, could probably get rid of every other one of these. Hold shift, click, backspace to remove. Now we have an even lower poly dagger. Now we're sitting at 464, so quite a bit lower. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to adjust the smoothing angles of everything. So let's make this HP. This is going to be LP. Let's actually do an underscore dagger. Hit OK. Now I'm going to manually set all the smoothing for this, and it won't take that long at all. Crease by smoothing angle, turn that off. And again, all these creases aren't going to be for aesthetically pleasing reasons. Our normal map is going to kind of control the smoothing of what's going on. Now what we're doing is we're going to set smoothing so the normal maps don't have to work as much. Our normal map bakes will be better. So I'm going to grab, realistically, probably easier to just grab 2 of these. L to loop, it grabs all the way around. Game tools, harden. That's done. This is good. This one, what we're going to do, let's go to a side view, is we're going to grab those and those. Make sure we get those on both sides. Harden. That one's good. And these, the only thing I need to do is make sure that this loops all the way around. Make those edges, so pretty much where the actual blade is, and hit harden. So now our smoothing is effectively done. So let's go ahead and unwrap the low. We don't need to unwrap the high. So unwrap, have that dagger low, actually make it visible so we can see it. And now the cool thing that we can do is a lot of our unwrapping is already done based off of our smoothing. And again, this isn't always the case, but you can kind of get the gist of it as you're working on it. So if I go to the game tools, if I do select hard edges and have this be my source for unwrapping, let's just do a quick save in case something bad happens. And let's just unwrap this. So unwrap, right click. So this is broke, and the reason why this is broke is because it's a big closed loop, but this is fine, those are all fine, that's fine, and this. So let's go to select UV border, and that should just be effectively where all of our hard edges were. So instead of this one, we're going to unselect that. Let's actually do this one on that side. This one right here, we're actually going to zoom in, and we actually want to grab this one on the bottom. So we're just adding to the unwrap now. And everything else should be good. Unwrap, right click. So we have this little scenario. Let's do a pack UVs, see what it gives us. Again, this is going to be kind of weird because these blades right here are so long. So again, I'm not going to take forever on this pack. This is something that if you definitely wanted to do a different pack, you could, but we're just going to keep this really simple. So again, our blade is going to easily be our longest piece. And again, we want to take that padding into consideration. So let's get this set up and have it not too close to the edge. So we'll scale it down just a little bit. Make sure that it's far away from the other one. And these, I'm just selecting an edge and hitting this rotate down, because this is going to align all these vertically. Again, the other thing under pack or the align tools, you can hit align vertically. Doesn't really matter which one you do. Whatever one you think is fastest, or you can perform the fastest, is probably going to be your best bet. So again, keeping these a little bit spaced apart from each other. Let's actually keep the like pieces together. So the pommel stuff's down here for the crossguard. So yeah, let's throw just going to use the rectangle tool on this one. Won't use it on those, and then this one. It's the bottom and that's the top. So again, we don't really need to have these oriented exactly the right way. So what I'm going to do is, so you can see I have quite a bit of extra space in here. So I'll actually just utilize this by bringing everything in close. And again, these are all kind of separate pieces. It's this crossguard, the counterweight, and then the handle. So we can just scale these up a little bit. Just utilize that extra space. And technically, if I wanted to, let's put this up top. The handle is kind of its own separate piece, so I'll scale that up a little bit. And same thing with these guys. There's really no harm in scaling those up a little bit. So just so it fills out this area a little bit better. So this will be good for the unwrap. So now let's go ahead, and before we bake this, I just want to kind of point something out. If I was to bake a normal map, or pretty much bake anything, and I have one thing close to another thing, sometimes the two things will kind of interact with each other in a negative way. So what I'm going to do is kind of make an exploded view of this and then bring everything back. So I'm just going to grab the high and the low at the same time of each of these pieces and just space them out a little. A little bit. So high and the low both selected. You can do that by grabbing one, hold shift, click, grab the other. You just need to lasso select. So I have the high and the low. Let's bring these up a little bit. Now I have the high and the low handle. Oops. Undo that real quick. I'm just bringing it straight up. High and the low blade. Bring that straight down. So now everything has a little bit of a distance from itself. And again, if you're afraid something bad's going to happen, you can even pull these really far apart from each other. It doesn't really matter, as long as the high piece and the low piece are sitting on top of each other. The other thing, our high unwrap, it doesn't really matter where that's at, if it's unwrapped or not. So just so it's not in the way, I just did a project from view and threw it over here. But again, that's not needed at all. So now let's go ahead and actually bake this normal map real quick. So we have our low on, our high on, low is selected, the unwrap is selected. Over here, we don't have any textures in here, so let's go to images, add clip, new image. And just in this Dagger file, I will make a Dagger underscore NML for normal. Save that as a PNG. Let's just make it a 2048. Go to the shading tree. Oops. Oops. Oh, we're clicking on stuff. Grab the material. Go to image map. We're just going to load image. Then we're in a weird folder. So Dagger normal. Hit OK. We're going to right click and change this to surface shading. And then normal. And then this is going to come up, just hit yes. And then you should be good. So now again, low poly selected, high poly turned on and visible. Again, it's not turned off, so they're kind of both visible. UVs are visible. Right click, bake from object to texture. We're not sure of this little distance, so what I'm going to do is I just know that the closest or the farthest away point would be kind of this point. It has to bake all the way down to this point right here. So distance wise, if I move that from one until it touches the other, it says 2.8 millimeters. So we'll just say 4 millimeters is going to be our distance. So right click, bake from object to texture, 4 millimeters, hit OK. We're not going to worry about cage baking or anything. So from here, this is our result. Let's go ahead and hit save image. Actually, let's make sure we have the right color space. We want it to be this darker blue, not this lighter blue. So sRGB linear. So this guy right here, LUT linear, looks like this. This is our output, what it's actually saving to, and have that be linear. Hit save, and we'll just save over this Dagger image. So PNG Dagger, hit save, replace existing, and it saves. So let's go ahead and turn our high poly off. So now our normal map is applied. It's under texture though, so we want to go to default, turn off our wireframe, and now I can see that again, this is the low poly. The high poly is right here, and it's turned off now. So this is the low. Let's actually grab this high and just move it over a little bit so we can compare these and see them at the same time. And we'll turn our wireframe on. So again, this is the low poly, this is the high poly. So again, all this detail transferring over as best it can. This one's a little bit harder to see. If we turn that off, it looks like this. So again, there's no actual bevel here. If I zoom in on this, it's just an edge. Oops. But again, all this detail's baking down. So let's just undo and get that Dagger back on top of each other. So let's move these all back into place. Again, making sure that we're moving all of the blade and both blades at the same time. That's a little goofy. So bring that one up into itself. Bring this one down. Lasso select. Bring this guy down. And we're good to go. We should have a high poly dagger that looks just like a low. So when I switch back and forth, you can see a difference here because again, this is just flat. This is the low poly. And the high, you can see this one looks like it sticks out just a little bit more. The handle, you're really not seeing a difference between those two as I toggle back and forth. And this one, what is this guy? Oh, it looks like I moved these two pieces a little bit too far. So the one that was actually dented in, you could just see this portion of the handle through it. But there we go. So high, low, high, low. And again, this one where it actually dents in, it's kind of faking it. So you're seeing a little bit of a difference there. And you're also in the silhouette seeing this is the low, so it's a little bit more faceted. This is the high, it's a little bit more round. So you can see that difference. Overall, though, we got a really good bake out of these two. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is creating the albedo or the diffuse map, and then doing the metal and gloss maps to finish this guy up. And then we'll have a complete finished asset with this high to low pipeline with normal baking and using all of our textures that we've utilized over the semester.